I get how scary guns must look if your only reference is the movies. Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's Scott Groves here with the On the Edge podcast, and I'm actually here with my new friend, James, who we're just going to leave it at that. It's James, because James works at a local firearms dealer, club, shop, whatever you want to call it, and we had this long conversation about firearms, AR-15s, suppressors, not silencers, background checks, ATF, all of the new licensing. Any of you watching this on YouTube will notice there is a AR-15 on the middle of the table. So if you're listening to this podcast, you might want to go check out the YouTube version, because we're going to be talking about this. And for all the gun nuts out there, everybody in the room has cleared this firearm. There is no live ammo in the entire room. There is no magazines in the room. So the gun has been checked and rechecked and checked again and put on safe. So we're good to go. And the angle of the cameras, they're already set up, so the barrel is not pointing at anybody. But anyway, James, let's talk first, man. Like, what is your background? How did you get into firearms? Because as soon as I asked a question about rifle setup, everybody at the shop turned to you and they're like, talk to that guy. He knows all the things.
Yeah, I just been shooting for a long time, and it was a huge passion project of mine. Built a bunch of these from the ground up, and
I'm going to get that mic in your face a little bit more. There we go.
And then I just really know a lot about them. I know how to operate with them very well, and I know what works for a lot of people. In general, everybody's a little bit different, but yeah, when it comes to AR-15 or this pattern style of rifle and suppressors to go with it and accessories, yeah, I'm pretty well versed in that.
So let's get all the misnomers out of the way. Can you explain what the AR-15 is and what it isn't? Because look, I get that if you're not familiar with firearms, this is very scary looking. This is very militaristic looking. Of course, people think that AR stands for assault rifle, which does not. So can you explain what the AR is, what the gun is, and maybe what it isn't? Like,
Sure.
Dispel some of the rumors and the myths.
So yes, like you mentioned, AR does not stand for assault rifle.
Yeah.
It just happened to be coincidence. But it stands for Armalite rifle. So Armalite was the first one to make this style of rifle, or the first one to patent it anyway, right? There's a lot of controversy on that one. But an AR-15 is like calling a four-door sedan a sedan. That's essentially what it is. And how you modify
it's like an F-150, right? Like the F-150 is just a nomenclature of a truck.
Correct. Yeah. It's like F-150. Well, which one do you have? Do you have the Lariat? Do you have the XLT? Which one is it? So it's just, when people say AR-15, it just denotes, a semi-auto rifle. Now people will say M16, which is not correct. M16 is the full auto military version.
Right.
Yeah.
You cannot buy, just for those that aren't familiar with gun culture, you cannot legally buy in America an M16. The M16 is the military version of this that's fully automatic and much scarier.
Well, not scarier, but you can buy a full auto M16 if it was built prior to 1986.
But aren't they like $100,000 or something crazy?
Really
yeah,
expensive.
I mean, it's a collector's piece.
It is,
yeah. Yeah. So, I think when people see this, and this bugs the hell out of me, they think, oh my goodness, this is a machine gun. People look at this and they think the movies, they think Rambo, Chuck Norris holding an M60 in each hand and just going to town. Can you explain, because you correctly use the nomenclature semi-automatic, can you explain the difference between an automatic rifle and a semi-automatic rifle? Which one's legal and which one is not?
Yeah, so semi-auto just means every time you pull the trigger, it shoots one round. Full auto is you pull that trigger and it just keeps going until it has no more ammo.
Yeah. So everything you see in The Matrix, everything you see in all of the 80s action movies is fully automatic. You pull the trigger one time and it disperses all the rounds in the magazine, and usually hundreds of rounds without ever having to reload, which, I get how scary guns must look if your only reference is the movies, because they don't fire like that.
Right, yeah. And Hollywood, being Hollywood, right?
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, honestly, like, people are scared of this, and I get it if you're not familiar with it. But if it were me, and we do live in America, right, if I'm going to defend my castle, this is what I would want.
Right, right. And what's crazy to me is people will be like, well, you should just be able to have a hunting rifle. Well, the interesting thing is the round that's on most hunting rifles is bigger than the caliber of the round in this. And this is effectively a hunting rifle with a magazine that fires more rounds. So like, to my mind, if you had a 308 or if you had a Remington, anything that you would go to hunt deer or pig or whatever, and you just created a magazine that held, 30 rounds instead of 3 rounds, it would be effectively the same rifle, unless of course it's a bolt rifle action. But I think people get this weird stuff in their head of like Biden will say this all the time. Like, I don't hate guns. I have a double barrel shotgun and I have a hunting rifle, but there's no reason you need a rifle that shoots a bullet so fast it could blow out somebody's chest. Well, spoiler alert, a deer rifle can blow out a deer's chest, and last time I checked, a deer was about 800 pounds more than me. Shotgun can definitely blow out a dude's chest. So I don't, do you know any of the history or the background or why this got vilified to like, oh my God, this is the evil thing, and the deer hunting rifle or the shotgun is very like traditional American?
Well, it's just an easy scapegoat because it's so prolific, right? It's the most popular platform of rifle in the United States. So it's really easy just to point and say, hey, that's an evil rifle, right? And because it's so popular or because it's so available, so many companies make them, the criminals or the people that want to do harm, this is the rifle they go to.
Right.
It's like anything else in life, right? When you look at people that drive drunk, for example, right? What's the type of alcohol usually in their system? Probably like, low shelf, whatever it is, the cheap stuff that they can load up on. So it's kind of like that. It's just really prolific. It's very available, and people buy it, and some people commit crimes with them, and the media just takes it way out of proportion.
Yeah, the drunk driving thing is interesting because if something happened where like we had some correlation, not causation, that 80% of the drunk driving accidents happen in F-150s. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody would be out to eliminate F-150s from the driver fleet of available vehicles. They would be thinking like, hey, what are the characteristics of the people that buy F-150s that they're so prone to drink and drive? I don't think anybody would be looking at Ford and being like, dude, you guys got to stop making the F-150 because like 80% of drunk drivers are driving an F-150. I think there would be some deep sociological and anthropological work to be like, hey, why are the people that like to drink and drive also attracted to F-150s? We really need to get to the root cause. And I mean, it's just so predictable now. Anytime there's any tragedy with a gun, immediately both sides of the political divide go to their talking points with the body's not even cold, and they're immediately anti-AR-15 or pro this or anti this or pro this, and it's so predictable that it's frustrating for me, even as like a gun supporter. So like you said, because this is so prolific, because it's a fairly easy firearm to manipulate, it does seem to be the choice of people that participate in shootings that make the news. I will say that. Because those are not even the majority of shootings. But what other firearms are frequently used in crimes?
Well, I mean, to touch on that point, that's actually really good. I was talking to, so I know a lot of law enforcement in town, right? Metro. And I shoot with them, train with them. They're a lot of good guys. And it's a pretty well-known statistic, right? That 4 out of 5 shootings that they respond to are self-defense. But how many do you see on the news that report self-defense shootings?
That's from Henderson PD, Las Vegas Metro.
That's from Metro specifically. That's from a patrol officer. Right?
Patrol officers.
Yeah, like
4 out of 5 fires, like discharge, are in self-defense.
Yes,
that's really surprising to me.
Now, of course, this isn't a metric that I can put up against a data poll or something that was official.
Right.
But this is what I'm hearing from people, from police officers on the street.
Yeah,
and that doesn't get reported, right? And the media they have their agenda, right? I'm not against media. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to take everything you're told with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And Chris, maybe you can bring up these numbers. By the way, shout out to Chris, our Jamie over there. He's going to do some fact checking. I think the most recent numbers that are available are either 2020 or 2021. The CDC specific report of causes of death. I'm going to bastardize the numbers a little bit, but I remember looking this up where it was like there was 47,000 gun deaths in America the year that I looked, and like 27,000 of them were suicides. So I was like, okay, so over like 2/3 of the gun violence, they'll say something like a gun death occurs every 7 minutes in America or something like that. Something like a half to 2/3 of them are suicide. So then I compared that to suicides in other countries like Australia, Japan, China, where they don't have access to firearms. Guess what? We're about the same. So they find a way to kill themselves no matter what. So if we take out the suicide deaths, right? Then you take out like justified shootings by police officers, justified shootings in self-defense. It's still a tragic number, but you get somewhere down to like 10,000 actual homicide deaths with firearms. And then you parse that out where like you take away the gang on gang violence. Now you're down to like 4,000 or 5,000, which each one of those are a tragedy. 4,000 or 5,000 tragic deaths in a country of 400 million people that own like 400 million guns. I hate to say it's not a problem because every death is a problem, but it doesn't seem like an overwhelming problem that we can't like have some consensus opinion on. And I think those numbers are fairly accurate.
Right. Well, so statistics, if you've ever taken a statistics course, right? Like,
no, I barely made it through high school.
Well, you can manipulate them any way you want, right? So they'll put these numbers out there like you mentioned earlier, but nobody will dig deeper. They'll be like, oh my God, 40,000 people died last year by gun violence. How many people died by tripping and falling, right?
Yeah.
It's quite a bit, actually. I think last time I checked, it was more than gun deaths. But, I mean, what makes the news, right? This is what sways public opinion, right? So,
right.
When somebody goes into a gun-free zone, which is a soft target, right, and then shoots up a bunch of innocent people, okay, which is 100% not acceptable. That's what gets reported week after week. That's what gets, put up on the news. They don't talk about, the guy that defended his house when he had 2 kids and, 4 guys try to rob him and kill him and his 2 kids and he shot him and killed him. That doesn't get reported, right?
Right. Unless you're specifically following like some 2A, Second Amendment, Instagram profiles where they try to get this news out.
Right.
You're never, ever, ever going to hear about the single mom that protected her house from the guy that was breaking in the middle of the night by shooting back.
Right.
Oh. Yeah, frustrating. All right, so back to this AR-15 platform. Why do you like it?
It's just so easy to use. and that's partially, so to my AK guys out there, okay, I get it. It's just what I grew up shooting. Like, this is America's rifle. This rifle is a dime a dozen, and it's just easy to pick up, easy to shoot, easy to practice with. Ammo is relatively cheap. Maybe not pre-COVID cheap, but
right.
And it's just super accurate. So, for example, here we have a down defense Mark 18 with the 10.3 inch barrel. With the correct optics setup, this gun could reach out to 500 yards, no issue.
Right.
So, I mean, you could do close, you could do far. It's just a really good platform.
Yeah. Love it. And when you say platform, can you kind of explain what that means? Because, a lot of people look at this and, okay, they see a gun. What I see is a bunch of components. Like I see all kinds of stuff that you can add on and take away. And like people really nerd out about this stuff. So can you talk about like what is a platform and maybe you can describe for the people that are listening versus watching on YouTube, like what did I add onto this thing?
So the platform of the AR-15 is pretty much, we're talking about like a chassis.
And by the way, can I just point out that I can always tell when I'm with a safe gun owner because like I cleared this rifle, you cleared this rifle, Chris cleared this rifle, you cleared this rifle again to show my kid how to clear a rifle. And as soon as you put hands on the rifle, you instinctively cleared it again to make sure there wasn't a round in there. Like anytime I see people not do that when I'm at the range, I'm like, ooh, I don't want to be shooting with you. So I appreciate you being such a conscious, safe gun owner, by the way. Anyway, okay. So the AR-15 platform, I see a whole bunch of components because I nerd out about this stuff like you do. So go for it.
Yeah. So it's like the chassis of a car, right? So the heart of the rifle is your barrel and your bolt carrier, which is this right here. This is the heart of the rifle. And then, you have the lower, which accepts standard mags. But what makes this so popular and, everybody kind of has one is because the military, the industrial complex has really churned out a lot of parts, a lot of different things you can do to this particular gun. So when the military does something, it's our taxpayer dollars, I get it, but they test the crap out of it, right?
Right.
And when they do this, they find all the little things that could do better, that can be better, right? And it's passed on trickle effect down to the civilians, and this is what makes this gun so modular, okay? So for my AK guys out there, for example, mounting an optic on an AK is near impossible. It was never designed that way. When the Russians created that gun, it was never designed to be used or further improved. Okay. But this gun from the beginning was designed to be modular. It had room for improvement, and we're pretty much at the peak of AR-15, perfection.
Yeah, I mean, you can replace rails and just all like butt stocks, and every piece on this can be modified one way or another. I've got 2 different sight setups on it just in case the red dot fails, and you can do a red dot. You can do some crazy shit out to like you said, 500 yards. You can put lights on it and suppressors on it, and like everything that you can do to this thing, you can kind of make it into handgun size. You can make it into really long rifle size. It's like there's pretty much nothing you can't do with this gun. And to your point, like once the military printed 10 million of these, it's pretty ubiquitous. Like you can find these parts for this thing anyway. It's just so convenient, which is why sadly it is the also preferred weapon amongst people that do the wrong thing with it. What else do you want to say about the AR-15 before we move on to other talking points?
Everybody should have one. I like to, when people ask me what gun should they buy, especially for home defense, or, lately we've been talking about, the end of the world or whatever, right. Zombies like a decade ago. Yeah. My answer has always been, and it has never changed, was the AR-15. Because one, parts are so available, like what we just talked about, right? If something goes down, you can find these literally like anywhere. Right. They're easy to use, they're light, and it's a great platform to have. So if you don't have one, for example, if I'm at my house and somebody's trying to come in, I'd rather have this with 30 rounds than anything else. Yeah. Sorry, shotgun guys, but yeah.
I like the scary sound of cocking a shotgun, but you get like a couple shots, maybe.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. Just, a lot of people, they get in this mindset where they want a shotgun so they can make the sound and scare people off, right? I like to compare that to if you drive a car and you emboss airbag on your steering wheel, but there's no airbag. Okay. It just makes you feel good, right? Oh yeah, it says airbag, right? But there's no airbag. So, to me, unfortunately, the world we live in now, you must train, you must be ready to use this because you are your first responder, right? Right. So a good case in point is that Nashville shooting. The police responded in 14 minutes, and when they arrived on scene, they eliminated the threat within 3. Okay. In 17 minutes of time, that is a lot of damage somebody can do. So if you are the type of person that, I'll just call the police, and let's say their response time to a school shooting is 14 minutes, what do you think their response time is to your home?
Yeah. Right. Well, I can tell you. Have I told this story on the podcast yet, Chris, where we had the crazy homeless guy? I don't think I have. Okay, so this is going to blow your mind. So my wife, I was out to breakfast with a coaching client or something. As I'm driving back, my wife drives right past me, which means she was literally loading up the kids 30 seconds earlier right here. And 1 block away, and we live in a pretty safe neighborhood in like what's statistically a very safe community in Henderson. There's a homeless dude in his underwear, a tool belt, and like a sweatshirt having a complete break with reality. And he's a block and a half away. One of our neighbors had those big blow up like Halloween doll things. So they had like a vampire and a werewolf and stuff out there. And he's arguing with the vampire, takes out a screwdriver and starts stabbing it. He's having a complete drug-induced or psychiatric break with reality. Just, you're not going to get me this time, devil, going nuts. He walks up to the front door, which thankfully had a metal screen door on it, and starts like banging on the door and trying to pry it open. So I have a vault in my truck. Luckily, I had a firearm with me. I called the police and I was like, hey, 911, what's your emergency? Did the whole thing. I'm like, here's where I'm at. Here's the address. Here's the situation. Like, there's a crazy dude with a screwdriver, and I can see him trying to like pry into the front door, pry into the garage. I know based on the cars that are home, husband's already left for work. Wife's in there, or wife and kids are in there. So I gave him my name. I told him I had a concealed carry. I'm like, I have a firearm. Like, what do I do if he gets into the house? And I mean, do I follow him? Do I shoot this guy? Like, what do I do? And they're like, police are en route. If you can observe, that's best. But if he's threatening somebody, use your best judgment. I'm like, oh, great. This is good. I'm thinking in my head, this is what's going to be replayed in the court. Like, use your best judgment. I'll be framed as the vigilante, and I'm just like, oh, God, like, please do not get in that door, because I don't know if she has a firearm. I don't know if she's going to shoot me in the crossfire. I don't know if I should follow him into somebody else's house with a gun when she doesn't know me that well. She might not recognize me and might freak out. So, like, all these things are going through my head. Dumb luck. The guy just kind of like has a moment of like clarity and starts, walking down the block. So I kind of tail him from a couple blocks away with the car. He ends up going into the park by our house. And I can hear him go into the bathroom. He's beating the shit out of like the urinal or the toilet because I can hear his like hands bouncing off of porcelain, and he's screaming, you're not going to get me this time, devil, blah, 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 blah. And so I'm, again, standing probably like 100 yards away, just telling the other moms with their little kids in the park, hey, go that way. There's a crazy homeless guy in the bathroom. I'm on the phone with 911. I'm like, hey, this is what I'm wearing. I have a concealed firearm. Please do not blow me away when you show up on the scene. Can you please relay to the officers what I'm wearing, who I am, where I'm standing? So this takes 28 minutes for the cops to respond. And they finally got there, and we had a long discussion about, law enforcement and vilifying the police and how they're down in recruits and they're down in staff and blah, 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 blah. And this is a really safe neighborhood. We very rarely have to come here. But attacking a law and orderment is not a violation of any penal code. So all we can do is kind of usher him away. And they even said, they're like, it's really sad. We have no place to put these people because we have no psychiatric wards anymore in America. If we arrest him, he's going to be gone in an hour because the DA doesn't want to press charges. So we kind of just like usher him out into the desert or the business zone and hope nature takes care of itself. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound really humane. And they're like, yeah, man, I'm sorry. Like, there's not a whole lot we can do. They're like, had he lunged at you and threatened you with the weapon and you had to shoot him, you would have been justified, or we could have arrested him for, attempted murder or something. But yeah, it's just a really shitty situation with these drug addicts, which 90% of the homeless people that we encounter on the street that are causing problems, it's all drug related. And I'm like, okay, well, all of this sounds like a horrible option. And it terrified me that it took almost 30 minutes for the cops to show up, because had I not been there and had he got into that garage, who knows? He probably stabs 2 or 3 of the occupants in the house before he like has a moment of clarity and is like, oh yeah, maybe this isn't the devil or Count Dracula. It was the craziest shit. And it like, it kind of awkwardly reinforced all the stuff we're talking about and all the stuff I already believed, which I'm just like, oh yeah, the cops aren't going to get there in time. So that was a very long story to your simple answer. I apologize, but I just thought it was worth sharing that, like, yeah, the cops aren't coming, or they're not coming fast enough.
Yeah. It was told to me one time, I believe he was a SWAT officer, but he was like, in a altercation like that. So let's say you're living your life, right? Under attack, you will always be the last to know, and you will always be the first to respond.
Ooh, say that again.
In an event, right, you will always be the last to know of an attack, but you will always be the first to respond.
Yeah.
Yeah. Criminals aren't going to be like, hey, Scott, I'm going to be seeing you tomorrow, 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock, right? Breaking into your garage, buddy.
No, you'll always be the last to know, but you'll always be the first to respond. So this is why I advocate people, familiarize themselves with firearms and learn how to protect themselves. Because, I mean, we live in America, right? So it's our right to. Sometimes it sucks because there was that couple years ago in Taiwan, there was a guy, he went nuts and he had a knife on a subway, ended up stabbing and killing like 30 people with a knife. You couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Right. And then, to all my conspiracy theorists out there, like you look at the Philippines, what happened about 5 years ago, right? When Muerte just went out and killed a bunch of drug dealers, or he thought were drug dealers, with the military, right? They have no defense against that. Right. Yeah. I mean, we live in America. We can own these things. Right. Should.
Yeah, it's quite a trade-off, right? Because it's like, I would not consider myself a Second Amendment absolutionist, where it's like, well, anybody should just be able to go in and buy anything. Like, I'm fine with background checks. I'm fine with what I would consider common sense legislation, but coming from California and now having my legal residence in Nevada for many reasons that I live here at least 181 days a year, so that I'm not in California more than 181 days a year at our other house. Coming from California, their goal is not make sense gun laws. Their their goal is to make it as complicated and as difficult as possible to discourage gun ownership. And then if you do own a gun, it's virtually impossible to not commit a felony. Because the way you travel, the gun's got to be in this compartment with 2 different types of locks, and then the ammo has to be in a different compartment. Oh, you own a Jeep, so there's technically not 2 different compartments because you don't have a separated trunk space. Oh, well, technically your firearm and the ammo were in the same compartment of the vehicle. You've now committed a felony. Oh, you're trying to do this, but you're not that. Oh, you've committed a felony. Oh, you own an AR-15, but and you have a bullet button, which is a little thing that stops the magazine from coming out, but you haven't upgraded to the newest form with the bullet button inside. Okay, now you're a felon. And it's like all they're doing is making people that want to own guns, they're turning them into felons, which I'm like, this just doesn't make a lick of sense. So I know you're not, you don't live in California, but have you kept up at all with any of their craziness?
Oh, 100%. Oh, yeah. I mean, I have a lot of family in California, right? So I do go visit. But it's one of those things where, you know, when you see these activists online, right, and they're talking about, oh, let's take away all your guns and let's take away your gun rights and stuff like that. You know, a lot of people don't realize, well, first of all, I agree with you. I do believe in sensible legislation. Yeah. Okay, I want to be clear. I'm not one of those dudes that like, yeah, I don't care what your background is. You should have a gun.
Right.
Right. It's not the case. All right. Like you beat your wife. You shouldn't have a gun. Right. You lost that, bro. You're a scumbag. Like get out. Right.
Yeah.
But you know, when they pass these type of laws and they vilify law-abiding citizens, right, it just hurts us as a community. And then when you see people that advocate for this, right, so hardcore leftists that, you know, will yell and scream about, oh, we should ban guns and ammo, they don't realize that if we really want to do harm, theoretically, if we want to do harm, we could.
Yeah.
In a grand scale, right? But we don't because we're law-abiding citizens. We're morally sound, right, of good character. That's what we are. That's why we have CCWs, right? That's why we carry a concealed weapons permit.
Explain what a CCW is and what it takes to get that in normal states like Nevada.
So in Nevada, anyway, you have to take a 8-hour course. You have to pass a competency test by shooting. And then you have to take a written exam. And then you have to wait 120 days to get your license issued by the state.
Yeah, and the state, my understanding is the state also does federal background check, a couple other like layers of database checking to make sure you're not a crazy.
Yeah, so we have, I think, I could be wrong, but I think it's a 7 or 9 point system where we don't just check locally, we check nationally, we check, you know, where you've lived because they make you put down where you lived. Yeah. So let's say you lived in California, right? Orange County, they'll check their records as well, make sure you don't have any outstanding whatever, right?
Yeah.
So in order to qualify for CCW, you can't even have a parking ticket.
And what does CCW stand for?
Concealed carry weapons, but it's concealed weapon permit, but we just call it CCW.
CCW. Yeah. Basically meaning that legally, you can carry a firearm concealed under your jacket, in your waistband, whatnot. Can you explain that to people that don't understand? Because there's one process for buying a gun, and then there's a CCW process, and then some states have adopted constitutional carry where you can do whatever you want. So can you kind of explain the progression of like, okay, I want to be a gun owner, you know, and this is state dependent, of course. Where does it go from like purchasing to CCW to like some states are just saying it's a free for all? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So when you buy a gun in any state, all right, in all 50 states, you must do a background check.
But wait, I just like could walk in and walk out with a machine gun.
No,
that's not the way it works.
No, it's not. So it's funny when people are like, "Oh yeah, we should have federal background checks." I'm like, "Yeah, those have been around for a minute."
Everybody who buys a gun in America. And we'll talk about the Gun Show Loophole, but everybody who buys a gun from a manufacturer or a gun store has to do a federal background check every single time. I've done many federal background checks. Yes. And every single time I buy one, I have to pass a federal background check. So that's any gun, any place in America. We'll talk about the Gun Show Loophole. We'll get back around to this. But anyway, and you can educate me on that. Okay, So you get your background check. Some states require you to take a little written test. Some states do not, and you can walk out with a firearm after you pass the background check. Then what's kind of next?
So and then you can get your CCW or your concealed weapons permit. So what that allows you to do is that you can carry your weapon in public places concealed, which is a huge advantage because, some people, when you carry concealed, you're not targeted for your firearm. Right. So,
because some guys I see do that cowboy carry. They got like a giant Desert Eagle handgun. It looks like something out of Dirty Harry on their hip. And I'm like, come on, bro. You're just making yourself a target and you just look silly.
It's an ego trip through and through. Like if you're not on official business or for law enforcement, you should, you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
But yes, so, you get a CCW and then you can conceal carry, which is great. It's a huge advantage, right? I conceal carry everywhere I go. It's just my own personal insurance. It's kind of like, if you bought a home, you wouldn't skimp out on homeowners insurance.
Yeah.
Right? It's the exact same thing. I carry a gun not because I'm out here being a vigilante or anything like that. I'm out here because if something were to happen, I'm literally the first and last line of defense for me and my loved ones.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you know what's funny is like I know a ton of people that have concealed carry, and usually what tips me off is I'll be out at like a cigar lounge with somebody and they'll be like, nah, I'm not drinking today. I'm like, are you carrying? They're like, yeah, how'd you know? I'm like, well, because all the people I know who drink, and then when they responsibly don't drink, it's usually because I have a firearm on them, because you cannot have a drink and carry your concealed carry.
Technically, you can. If you can't, the rule is if you can't drive, you can't carry.
Right.
Yeah. So
so you could technically have a beer or two in an hour and be okay.
Oh yeah.
I know I never want that to come up.
Right.
Like God forbid I have to use a firearm in an emergency situation and I had a mimosa at breakfast.
Right.
It's like, oh God, now it all gets called into question. Like I don't want to have anything to do with it. Okay. So then you have your weirdos that like to cowboy carry, and some states like Nevada allow that. You've got responsible citizens who conceal carry. And then can you explain what constitutional carry is for anybody who's heard this term in the news lately?
Of course, but before we do, I want to touch up on something. So you said, if you had a mimosa and then had to use your gun, everything calls into question, right? This is something I highly want to stress to people, is that no matter what the legal implications are, right? No matter what it is, that 2 seconds of your life, if you have to use your gun or not, is worth it. Because I tell people, I'm like, if you're dead, don't matter. Right. But if you can live and explain your story, go through the headache of, a lot of people, they go, oh, I don't carry my gun, like my sister. I don't carry my gun because like if I ever have to use it, it'd be such a nightmare. I'm like, okay, so you're telling me you'd rather be dead.
Right.
She's like, why are you so dramatic? I'm like,
because that's the only time you would present a firearm.
Correct. Yeah. You don't do it for fun. You do it because your life depends on it.
Right.
So anyway, I just want to touch upon that.
No, everybody I know that carries a gun in the anticipation that like, please God, I never want to have to reveal that I have a firearm on me. I never want to have to draw it. I never want to have to like, you never want to have to make a life or death decision in your entire life. I don't like making life or death decisions when I'm on the 405. Right. So yeah, everybody I know that responsibly conceals carry, their thought process is like, it's there. I know it's there. My loved ones know it's there. And just God forbid the day I ever have to actually present a firearm in the situation to like prevent violence or stop violence from happening to me. I mean, it's just, it's a scary thought. And I think it's something that like people like you and I actually think through and train for.
Yeah. No, it's one of those misconceptions where, people will take it out of context. Like, oh, you carry a gun because you're looking for trouble. Right. And I'm not giving an excuse to the people that actually do that. There's people that are looking for trouble. Yeah. Right. They think they're above the law. But most of us, we carry responsibly.
I will tell you, the very first firearm I bought in Vegas, I was asking them about the concealed carry process and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, yeah. And just remember, like, this is a cowboy carry state. So like you can legally have like your gun on the dash, blah, 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 blah. He's like, but you'll appreciate the fact that most people here are nicer, more polite drivers because just assume everybody has a gun in their car. I'm like, really? And they're like, yes. Firearms are very prevalent in the state of Nevada. Just assume everybody has a gun in their car. Act accordingly. Don't be flipping people off and having road rage. I'm like, okay, good to know. And the guy's like, tell your wife. I'm like, dude, my wife's like the sweetest driver ever. She's the one that apologizes when she has to make a legal right-hand turn. So she's going to be fine. I have been known to partake in a little bit of road rage, so it was a good warning to me that just about everybody in Nevada has a gun in their car.
Oh yeah, and most of the crimes that do happen that escalate to a shooting, typically, it's from people from California. Yeah, because they don't understand that, right? They come here and they think they can act the way they do in California with no repercussions, when there are repercussions. For example, like, all that noise going up in San Francisco where they break into cars and steal bags. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would not work here, at all. Now, I'm not advocating you go out and hunt people down,
right?
But it would just not be as prevalent here because everybody usually is armed.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot more armed people in Nevada
100%.
than California for sure. But there is some, for legal gun owners, there is some good news. Like, I just heard that Newsom got like 4 back-to-back gun cases smacked in the face by the California Supreme Court. And I think one of them is going to the Supreme Court, where like the gun roster law, they've basically made it they've made it impossible over the last 30 years to get a CCW in counties like Los Angeles County and Orange County. That's been reprieved. So for legal gun owners, there is a lot of good news on the horizon in California, which is pretty cool. The magazine capacity ban, all that stuff, it looks like it's going out the window in California, which it will be interesting because, if I'm trying to steel man the argument for more gun regulation. And Chris, maybe you could check this to verify. I do think violent crimes committed with firearms, or most importantly, deaths caused by firearms in California, I think it is per capita significantly lower than more like gun-toting free states like Nevada and Texas. So if I was trying to steel man the argument, I would be like, well, we do have a piece of evidence here that in states like California, where they are really militant about the gun regulations, like the per capita gun deaths are lower. Now, I don't know if that's made up somewhere else because the per capita knife deaths are higher, but it's statistics that would be worth looking at as a test case.
Just a real quick check up. California has the most strict control in the continental U.S. I guess they're saying Hawaii is more strict, but 3.5 per 100,000. The most gun-friendly is Mississippi, and they have 10.2 per 100,000.
Wow. I mean, that's significant. I've heard Hawaii has the best gun control because it's just hard to get guns onto the island.
Yeah.
It's like when you're an island, you can control whatever you want, right? It's like real hard.
Like when you say continental, there's obviously a better statistic in either Hawaii or Alaska, and it sure shit isn't Alaska.
It's not Alaska. Dude, did you ever watch that Alaska Trooper show?
I know of it, but no.
Okay, so this is crazy. Growing up in like a major metropolitan area, right? Like if we discharged around here and then my wife called domestic violence into 911, there'd be a fucking SWAT team on the front door here, LA, Chicago, whatever. In Alaska, these like on patrol single state troopers or rangers or whatever, Mountie, whatever they call them, are like just out in the wilderness. They hear like a campfire off in the distance, just shooting off guns. And like one dude with no backup walks up, "Hey guys, gonna need you to put your firearms away." And there's like 6 dudes sitting around a campfire just shooting guns into the air. And I'm like, this is the craziest job on planet Earth. That he's going in with like no backup, no anything, just walking up this road to this campfire, just hoping these guys don't turn on him. I'm like, fuck that job.
Well, I mean, it comes with the sense of, your community as well.
Right.
Right. So if that's a normal thing there, which I'm assuming it is.
Yeah.
He's not as spooked, right?
Yeah. But some of these guys are like poachers, and he knows they're doing illegal stuff out there, killing animals they're not supposed to. Yeah. Like walking up on somebody who's committing a crime, who is heavily armed, and there's like you and your sidearm, like hard pass on that job. All right, cool. So we got a little bit off track, but CCW and then constitutional carry. Like I know a bunch of states have just started passing this.
Yeah, so typically, constitutional carry just states that if you're legally allowed to buy a gun, you don't need a permit to conceal carry.
Got it. So you can skip the training or what have you.
Right, yeah. You just, you have a driver's license, you pass a background check, you bought a gun, go ahead and conceal carry, you're good.
Yeah.
What some states have been, now, let's say you're in Utah and you're concealed carrying, right, without a permit, which you're allowed to. You go to Nevada, that does not apply. You have to follow every state's laws.
Right.
So a lot of these constitutional carry states, what will happen is they'll offer like an enhanced CCW.
Right. Because I think the CCW you get in Nevada is valid in like 11 different states. Of course not.
It's like 31 states.
31, okay. Of course not California. No. Of course not New York. But like all the rational states, when it comes to gun control, we're irrational in plenty of other ways.
Right.
But when it comes to gun control, like if you get a CCW in Nevada, I carry that card on me religiously because if I did drive out of state anywhere other than California, I'd be pretty pretty good to go.
Yeah.
In the surrounding states.
Yeah.
All right, interesting. So can you talk about the training that's like required, and then maybe some of the training that's optional? Because I know you and I both pay to like stay trained, right? Because God forbid we ever have to present our firearm for personal safety. But like, what's required again on the CCW? At least in the state of Nevada, which I think it's pretty much the same for most states that I've checked out.
So it's an 8-hour course. It's mandatory, and then you do a
death by PowerPoint, right? Like you're just watching.
Depends on the instructor.
PowerPoint slides on the legality. And
no, I've done enough corporate meetings. I know not to death by PowerPoint. But anyway, so 8-hour course, and then you have to show a competency test. So
what does that mean?
You shoot 30 rounds at 3, 5, and 7 yards, and you must score 270 and above out of 300.
Got it. So you have to hit paper, you have to hit the target, you have to show that like in presenting your firearm at a close quarters, like you can actually hit the target and not
because
kill your neighbor.
It's a moral thing, because even though you took the class and even though you can pass the written exam, if you can't, it's like the driver's test.
Right.
If you can't show me you can't drive, then you can't have a license.
Right.
Right. Same exact thing. So once you do that, then you take a test that's 50 questions, and you can only miss 5 out of the 50. And then once you pass that, then you get a certificate from an instructor, submit it to Metro, and then they have to issue you a permit within 120 days.
Assuming you don't fail the background.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Where shall issue state. So if you can pass the background, then they have to issue you a permit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Funny story, totally unrelated. I used to shop at Turner's gun store. They're a chain down in Southern California when I lived there. And I was waiting for a background check or something, and we were just shooting the shit. I'm like, hey, what's the craziest thing you've ever seen? They're like, well, on the federal form that you have to fill out for the background check. And it's like, yeah. He's like, there's a question on there, yes or no. Are you currently wanted, like AWOL from the military, or have a warrant for your arrest?
Yeah.
And a guy just wrote yes. And they're like, no, sir, I think you misunderstood the question. Do you currently have a warrant out for your arrest? Are you a wanted fugitive, or are you AWOL from the military? He's like, yeah, no, I have an open warrant. There happened to be a police officer at the stand buying a firearm. So he just took off a firearm, took out his handcuffs. He's like, sir, I'm going to need you to place your hands behind your back. So like, as the guy was trying to buy a firearm, not only was he was so stupid, he didn't know how to lie on the federal background form, which then, of course, they would have just rejected the background form because they would have found that he was out on a warrant. But he just effectively turned himself in right there at the gun store to a cop. And I'm like, wow, that guy was not smart enough to be a criminal, much less be a gun owner. So system worked in that situation.
Yeah, and, if you answer yes to any of those questions on the 4473, the store doesn't even run a background check. You're automatically denied.
Oh, so they're like, get out of the store, you're done?
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe not get out. You can buy whatever else you want. You just can't buy a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you answer yes, they don't even run it. It's an automatic denial.
Oh, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
How much of your job is just tedious paperwork to stay compliant with the federal government? Because I imagine owning a gun store seems very like that would be a fun retirement project for me to own a firearm facility or stores. And then I think about like, oh my God, I hate paperwork so much. I've spent my whole life doing mortgage paperwork. The last thing I want to do is federal paperwork that have like serious real world implications.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's about 50%, if not more. Yeah. Yeah. And they're what's the word I'm looking for? You cannot make any mistakes. So, for example, if somebody said yes to like, I am a fugitive, and you didn't catch it, right? And for some reason they passed the background because, systems are flawed at times, and you release a gun and you get caught in that, they can take your license away. It's like a one-strike policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if there is no do-overs, there is no, oh, hey, let me, because once a customer leaves, that's it. You can't force them to come back.
Right.
So yeah, paperwork has to be meticulous, and it is a nightmare. So it's probably not
this
the
is
best
funny.
Idea.
So this will give a good example to people of like, you just can't walk in and buy a firearm. So I had bought a firearm that originated from a range in Texas. I bought Tim Kennedy's 509 with all the cool Gucci gadgets on it and everything. I was like, it looks cool. I want to support Tim Kennedy and his mission. I'll buy his overpriced FN 509. So I bought it when I was still a legal resident of California, but it was going to take like a couple months to ship it. All right. So in the meantime, we legally moved to Nevada 181 days out of the year. And I got my Nevada driver's license. So they punched a hole in my California driver's license. So I go to California to pick up the gun and they're like, no, you have this hole punch in your card. You're no longer a valid California resident. We can't sell you a gun here. I'm like, well, you weren't selling it. You were just transferred. I already bought it. I already filled the background check. I passed everything. They're like, yeah, too bad. I'm like, fuck. Okay, so then I had to have it license transferred to a legal dealership in Nevada. So I got it transferred over here to like Boulder City Guns or something. I go in there. I'm like so frustrated by the whole process. And I'm like, hey, my name is Scott Groves. We transferred a firearm up here. They're like, cool. What is it? I'm like, it was like a FN 509. And they go, what caliber is it? I'm like, I don't remember what caliber it was. I bought it online for my wife to shoot. And they're like, oh, straw gun purchase for somebody other than yourself? I'm like, no, it's my gun. It's going to be in my name. It's going to be in my safe. I just remember, I can't remember if it was a 22 or a 9mm, but I bought it so my wife could shoot it at the range so she'd be a little bit more comfortable. They're like, nope, you're buying a firearm for somebody else. We will not release the gun to you. The options are send it back to Texas or bring your wife in to do the background check. Fuck! So now I got to bring my wife, who never wanted to have a firearm in her name to begin with ever. I had to bring her in to fill it out. But now she knows that, like, she's buying the gun. It's for her. It's going to be in her name. But I'm going to be the one that primarily shoots it. So now it's like this gray area of like, well, because of the weird ATF laws, did they actually coerce us into doing something that's against the spirit of the law? And I'm like, well, now the whole thing is just janky. So now my wife, she has all of her legal permit information. She had to go sit through all the classes. She's super bitter at me because she has no intention of ever firing a firearm, ever. Doesn't matter what the situation is. And I'm like, honey, I'm so sorry. And then the real problem was the ruse was up, because when they made her sign off on the invoice, she was like, I thought you said this gun was like $500. I was like, well, not exactly. I did not spend $500 on the Gucci'd out 509. It was more like $1,800. And then the cat was out of the bag because I had been telling her for years that all the guns that I bought were $500. But my point is like, the gun dealers are trying to do the right thing and make sure that all federal laws are enforced. Background checks happen, that they're not selling to some criminal, to the point where like, mentioning that this gun was going to be for my wife to shoot caused a huge problem. They would not release the gun to me. And I just want people to hear that story, to know that, like, it's not like you walk into, Walmart and you walk out with a machine gun to go do harm. Like, it's not the case. So can you talk about the famous gun show loophole that shows up all the time, anytime this argument comes up?
So that's not something that you can do in Nevada anymore as of 2020. But
and I don't think you can do it in California. Chris, you're going to have to fact check this as well. Can you see if they ended the gun show loophole in California, which I think they're doing this in most states?
Yeah, I wasn't really familiar with how California did it, but here, before 2020, as a normal person, I could sell you a gun out of the trunk of my car, write you a receipt, cash would exchange, and that would be done. It'd be it.
Yeah.
It was really like the Wild Wild West. It was awesome. Like, and it was perfectly legal. This isn't no like gray area, right? This was legitimate. Like, hey, the law says you can do this.
And that was because you weren't buying from a manufacturer. You were buying a gun that had already passed to somebody's hands in a background check. And the theory was, if I'm a responsible citizen who passed a background check, I bought a gun, private purchase, I bought a gun, but then I wanted to sell it private purchase, I would only sell it to somebody who I would trust to not go do harm. That was kind of the theory, right?
Right.
It was like having somebody vouch for you on a notary if you've lost your ID. It's like, well, you're not going to vouch for me if I'm stealing this house if we can prove what your ID is. Seems like a very flawed idea, and I'm kind of glad they got rid of it.
Yeah, it was just pretty funny. But yeah, that was the loophole that everybody used, but that's no longer in effect at all. In order to transfer firearms, the buyer, well, you have to do it at an FFL, and the buyer must.
So what's an FFL?
Federal firearms license.
Got it. So you have to go to a store. You have to go to a store that's legally licensed to exchange firearms. So if I wanted to sell you this gun, mortgage business is a little slow right now. I need this $1,500. I offered to sell you this gun for $1,500, which I think you would probably take. We would go to a place like Turner's Sports Warehouse or whatever, FFL, and we would say, hey, I want to sell this gun to James. Can you guys fill all the paperwork for me? That's now the requirement in Nevada. I can't sell this out in the trunk of my car to one of the dudes at Jiu-Jitsu.
Correct. Yeah.
Got it.
Yep.
Although this is interesting, and of course, I would never break the law. I would never encourage anybody else to break the law. But how would they track that theoretically? Because I know unlike California, which does have a state registry, every gun you buy, they take the serial number, they match it to the person. There's other states like California that says, no, we're not going to keep a registry of all the guns that Scott owns. If he buys the firearm legally, that's the end of it. We're not going to track that firearm by serial number. So I guess they wouldn't really know if I was selling my guns out the back door after I bought them from the front door. That's probably a criticism of the policy, right?
Well, so Nevada doesn't have a registry. For example, when you buy this gun, they don't even know what it is.
Got it.
When you bought it, it was just like, oh, he's buying a pistol, right?
Got it.
What happens is, let's say you sell it to me, and this is theoretical. Let's say you sell it to me, or hypothetical, I'm sorry, and I use it and commit a crime.
Yes.
And we didn't do it the right way, right? So you sell it to me right now, I go out and I commit a crime. And then I get caught. And then they run this serial and they go, okay, it's obviously a down defense. They go down defense, they go, and this is how ATF trace works, by the way. They go, okay, hey, where'd this gun go? They go, oh, it went to distribution. All right, they go to that distribution center and they go, hey, where'd this gun go? They went to this
Turner's
gun store.
Warehouse or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And then be like, okay, Turner's, let me see the form that the guy filled out when you released his gun. All right, it went to Scott. And then they go to you. Hey, where's your gun? You never filed it missing. You never filed it stolen.
Right.
You must still have it. No, what do you do?
Yeah.
You're caught.
You're busted.
So yes, nobody would know, but it's not a risk that anybody is willing to take because you literally put your entire future into somebody else's hands.
Yeah. So I always thought that's what people meant by like ghost guns. Like, oh, I was buying guns legally and then selling them to somebody else. But I'm like, no, that's not a ghost gun because there's still a serial number on it. There's still a way to track it down and for law enforcement to find out what the chain of custody was. When I have a friend, Mariana Van Zeveren, awesome show called Trafficked on Nat Geo, where she goes and she finds, like, she does interviews with like hardcore scary people that are trafficking different things, organs, drugs, guns, people. Oh, it's horrific. But she did a whole show on ghost guns, and that really opened my eyes to what ghost guns were. So when we're talking about kind of that term that's in like the social zeitgeist, are you familiar with, or do you know what a ghost gun is? Like, obviously they're highly illegal, but do you know what they are conceptually?
Yeah, I mean, ghost guns is just a gun, or it doesn't even have to be this gun, but it's just a device that can expel a projectile with a form of combustion that doesn't have a serial number.
Got it. So it's 3D printed, or somebody mills it themselves in their garage.
Correct. Yeah. Which theoretically, if you had a 3D printer and a block of aluminum, you could make anything you want, including guns.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But then we get in a whole another rabbit hole on that.
Once 3D printers became, this is my belief, so tell me where I'm wrong and maybe where I'm right. Once 3D printers became something you could buy on Amazon for about $500, the idea of gun control or legal, the idea of controlling people that own firearms legally becomes real silly. Because with a 3D printer and a block of aluminum, like you said, you can basically print a whole lot of firearms that are non-traceable. They're illegal as hell, but if you're doing that, you probably don't care about the legality of it. It's like, okay, so you don't even have the argument anymore that like, well, we got to keep guns out of the hands of legal owners, because if Scott gets his house broken into and he doesn't get to kill the dude who broke into his house trying to kill him first, then yeah, you could steal them, but now you can just print them.
Well, so that brings up a good point. Do you remember, I think it was last year, when the ex-prime minister of Japan got assassinated?
Oh, yeah. They shot him in public, right?
Right, yeah, in public. So Japan, Asia generally, so you have Japan, China, Taiwan, and Korea.
Right.
Have some of the strictest gun laws. Like, it's insane. Even the police officers are like, they don't even shoot people. Like, they just don't.
Which some would argue probably a good thing.
No, 100%. But you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just so frowned upon. Like, so they all have mandatory service, right? So a lot of my friends that live in those countries, they all served. They don't fire more than like, I don't know, 100 rounds within 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like really frowned upon, right?
Yeah. No gun culture whatsoever.
None whatsoever.
Which is weird because they make some of the best action movies in the world. Like Hard Boiled from, I don't know if Hard Boiled is a Japanese or a Chinese movie. Amazing. Like one of my all-time favorite action movies. Anyway, I digress.
But so with that being said, a guy made a shotgun, right, in Japan and killed the ex-prime minister.
Yeah.
So my point being why I bring this up is because bad people will do bad things, period, right? When I first started shooting, it was a hobby for me. It just happened after COVID that it turned into this huge, like, everybody should own a gun, everybody should train, the world is on fire. I mean, the U.S. was in flames, right, during the whole George Floyd thing, right?
Right.
You know, Santa Monica, one of the richest zip codes in the country, right, boarded up, you know?
Yeah.
So it just happened to turn out this way. But bad people will do bad things.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I have a friend who I never use by name because there's just no reason to. He lives in Santa Monica. He lives in like there's like almost beachside, maybe a block or two from the beach. 5-story condos, absolutely gorgeous. I mean, you can't sniff a 1-bedroom in his complex for under $1 million. It's just amazing. And caddy corner to his window, has a little sliver of a beach view. Caddy corner to his window is a Starbucks that got looted and burned down. And, you know, he got in touch with me and he's like, hey man, like I might need to get the fuck out of here. Like he actually asked me, can I borrow a gun? I was like, no. I'm like, first of all, people like you that vote for the things you do, you have made it that would be like 9 felonies on me if I just let you borrow a gun. And that would be completely irresponsible because you haven't trained with one. You'll end up blowing your own foot off before you defend yourself. So no, but you can come 35 miles away to my house in Valencia and you can stay with me for as long as you want. Because look, man, if they're burning down the Starbucks and they're anti-capitalism, anti-this, anti-whatever, it doesn't take a whole lot for them to turn around and be like, oh, the people we really hate live in that condo. Let's go raid that condo building. Yeah. I mean, it was another friend of mine called, and she wouldn't mind me using her name, but again, no reason to. She called me. She sent me a picture. She lives in like beautiful suburbs of Minneapolis, adjacent to a bunch of car dealerships that were getting burned to the ground. And they had a civilian police version of like an MRAP, basically like an armored truck, blocking the gate to their community because it's a pretty affluent community. And there was just like a cop tank 4 blocks from her house, like hopefully to at least give some deterrent from the protesters to not make a hard right and just go into this neighborhood and burn it down. And I'm like, even then, people were like, well, I don't know if I should own a gun. I'm like, what the fuck do you mean you don't know if you should own a gun? Like, there's literally people burning down houses and businesses 4 blocks from your house. That's the number one time to think like, ooh, maybe I should reevaluate this gun ownership thing, which she did, and her husband have now taken a ton of training, and they have a bunch of firearms, so I'm happy for them, and they're safe gun owners. I love them. So anyways, shout out Vanessa if you're watching. Just nuts. Just crazy that people would think like we didn't have toilet paper for a couple weeks. Yeah. Now imagine if COVID had like a 10% death rate instead of a 0.01% death rate and there was no food. It only takes about 9 meals before society collapses into bedlam for however long it takes to restore sanity. Right. I mean, it's just nuts. Oh, there was no point in that. There was no question. I'm not asking good questions tonight because this is just like a topic that I get passionate about. So can you talk real quick about the ATF stupidity on why this piece has to be shaped like this and what's going on with this piece? And for any of the like hall monitors that are watching, everything on this gun is currently set up legally. And the thing that James is going to talk about, I have already submitted all my paperwork to the ATF for this, we'll call it AR pistol, maybe it's a short barrel rifle, whatever they're going to reclassify it as. But can you explain this piece? And for those of you that aren't watching, I have this little plastic piece at the barrel of my AR pistol that prevents me from sliding my hand too far forward and blowing off my own fingertips. And then on the back, I have this other plastic piece that's considered a forearm brace or a pistol brace. And a lot of this is in controversy right now with the ATF for reasons that I don't understand. So can you talk us through this firearm and why these two pieces have to be how they are and what the controversy is?
Yeah, sure. Now, just to specify, I don't know the exact vernacular of how the law is written, but in general, this is an AR pistol, right, as of right now. And on a pistol, according to the ATF, you cannot use two forms of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Stabilization?
Right, yeah. So you can't put a vertical grip because technically you're gripping the gun 2 points of contact.
Okay, so I can own this.
Yes.
But if this front piece of plastic is more of a grip?
Yes. If it was straight down, if it was perpendicular to the rail, it is illegal.
Why?
Because that's what the ATF deems it to be.
Okay. So somehow they think this, as it is, not dangerous. If I put a piece of plastic here where I can hold two pieces at one time, dangerous.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And that
ATF is stupid. But
so to be fair,
there goes our YouTube channel, by the way.
And I'm not I'm not one of those guys that leans heavy right, like abolish the ATF, right? Because they got a job to do.
Right.
We're all humans, right? A lot of people seem to forget that, and we all work for somebody. But at the same time, their job is kind of difficult because us as civilians, we're always trying to route, certain restrictions, which is normal, right?
Right.
Ever since you were a kid, if they're like, hey, don't eat ice cream before dinner, what are you going to do? You're going to find every single possible solution to eat ice cream before dinner, right? So, so they do have a hard job, and I get it. Sometimes they're a little retarded, they're a little weird, but it is what it is. Now, with this, this was originally designed to help disabled people shoot AR-15s and enjoy the sport, right? So when SB Tactical first made this, it's designed to stick your hand through here.
You can unvelcro that and show people what you're talking about.
So you unzip this, right? And you stick your hand through here and you can shoot it. Velcro it back up and then you're good to go.
Yeah, easier to shoot if you're missing a hand or you're missing a digit, or I think this was from an Afghanistan war vet, right? Who had blown off a hand.
Yeah. Something like that.
He's blown off a hand or an arm, still wanted to be able to shoot an AR platform, so he fashioned this brace that could go around his forearm or his bicep, and he could basically shoot this one-handed. And then like all good gun manufacturers are like, oh, sweet, loophole. So they made this plastic brace into what would this be called if it was squared off and it did not have the Velcro and it didn't have the brace aspect to it? Would it just be considered a stock?
It would be.
A stock. Okay.
So to ATF's credit, okay, is that when they allowed this, they knew the vision of what this was supposed to be.
Right.
And when I saw this, I thought what everybody else thought was like, awesome, I'm not registering my SBR.
Right. And can you explain what's an SBR and why does it have to be registered differently than a normal AR-15?
Yeah, 100%. And then I want to circle back to this. But so an SBR, so what this is a pistol. What it was a pistol. So no vertical grip, no stock.
Doesn't look like any pistol I ever owned. But anyway.
Well, to the ATF, this was classified as a pistol. Now, an SBR is a short-barreled rifle. So what that means is that the rifle has a barrel length of 16 inches and shorter. You have to submit you have to get permission from the ATF, get a tax stamp, pay $200 to the ATF, and get that registered onto their registry.
So it's an enhanced background check for me, and the rifle goes on a registry.
Correct. Yeah. Now that gives you pros and cons. The pros are, and this is where I agree with people, we should take that out of their purview, is that the pros are you can put a stock on this pistol, right? And you can put a vertical grip, and then that's it. That's all that changes.
Right.
Okay. It shoots the same round, same accessories, nothing else changes on that, right? But you have to have permission from the ATF to do this. Now, it causes problems because once you do that, this gun becomes yours pretty much forever.
Right.
It's really hard to sell because then you have to do a Form 3. The buyer has to wait. Nobody has patience like that. They'll just go buy a new one. Now,
and just you said shoots the same round, has all the same components. This is the part that I've never understood. This with a vertical grip, this here with this little X piece or Y piece or triangular piece I have on it, this versus a real stock that you can't put your hand through. None of that changes the mechanics of the gun or the availability of this thing to either be used for harm or be used for good. So I've never understood, other than like they're just trying to make it harder for gun owners, what's the ATF's argument for saying like, okay, well, you can only own an SBR, a short-barreled rifle, which I get it. This can be concealed in a backpack. You can only own this if you give us an extra $200 tax stamp and like register it. Like what's their vision or what's their regulatory reason for wanting to do that in the first place?
So I can't remember when, but I think it was like in the 50s or the 40s. I don't remember. But when the NFA was enacted the first time around.
What's the NFA?
The National Firearms Act.
Okay.
This was a compromise that actually we put into place. So I can't remember the exact specifics, but ATF was looking for a scapegoat, right? And everybody at the time was shooting regular rifles. This was not in existence at the time. So they were like, easy, SBRs, short barrel rifle, less than 16 inches. We got to get permission, $200. We'll let you have it. It was a win that we gave them.
Got it.
From what I remember. And it just kind of stuck around, right? And a lot of people get mad about the $200, but back in the 50s, $200 was like $2,000. Yeah. Back in the day. So it was designed in a way where it was unfeasible to register anything on the firearms.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So with everything that's changing, $200 now doesn't seem like such a bad deal, right? But that's just me compromising.
Yeah.
But with the whole brace thing, what happened was ATF, a lot of people, they get into this whole thing where, they're tracking it, they're going to come get it and whatnot. I'm like, if they, my theory on law enforcement is if they really tread on your rights, you're going to win in court. Yeah. And you're going to make a lot of money.
Yeah. Fair.
Okay. So in my mind, my theory is that they saw this, they approved it, and then 10 years later, they knew they screwed up.
Yeah, that's the important part, right? The ATF said yes. The ATF saw this thing, this brace, this componentry. I mean, this was legally sold for a decade. This one that I bought about a year and a half ago. This was all legal. There was no concern ever that this little plastic piece was going to become the bane of my existence and cause a $200 extra tax to the government and registration and 6 months waiting period. Because technically, although I own this gun legally and I have filled out the paperwork, in 6 months, they can come back and say, no, you don't own this gun anymore.
Yep.
In which case, I have to turn it in or whatever the case may be.
So what the crazy thing to me is, let's say you didn't do your paperwork, Scott. Right. Let's say you're like, you know what? I don't want that, right? If you do this, this is legal.
Okay, for those of you listening to the podcast, all he did was he took off the plastic brace, which I could use as a stock to put in my shoulder, but now I still have the tube at the end of the gun. It is the same length. It fires in the exact same way. I could use this little, quarter, about diameter of a quarter, end of the buffer tube on the back of the firearm. I could use that to stick in my shoulder and fire exactly the same way. And the ATF is saying this is legal, but put this back on, and this is illegal.
Correct.
This is where the gun control people just lose me, because this is the dumbest shit ever. Like, this does not change my ability to do damage or do good with this firearm. And a criminal is not going to be like, well, all right, Scott, I'm going to go ahead and take this off because this is illegal. But I mean, it's just to me, it feels so much like the government does in many areas of the world, where it's just regulation for the sake of regulation.
Well, and actually, that's exactly what it is.